no matter what you do, the thing that's in your head evolves into this thing when it comes into reality. And how that happens is spells the difference between whether you get a good movie or a bad movie, So when you say, yeah, okay, we got John Travolta to play the bad guy. Oh, but he wants to shoot in Florida. Then you have a decision to make as a director. You're like, all right,
Yeah.
does this movie, set in Florida? My answer, no.
We are here with Thomas Jane. Mr. Thomas, how you doing?
Hey, what's up, fellas? Good to see you.
Good. Good. Very good. Very good.
Really good.
We've been doing kind of like a retrospective on the Punisher. So, we've covered
Okay.
well, we've covered your film, we've covered Punisher Warzone. We'll probably do the Dolph Lundgren at some point.
Okay.
But I want to talk about yours and of course Dirty Laundry, which is like forget about it. I gotta ask you this, man. When you got approached to be Frank Castle, word on the street, you turned it down twice. Is that true? Is that bullshit?
Oh, no, that's true. Yeah. See, I was a comic book fan as a kid, and I loved comics. They changed my life, especially it was the 80s. So we're looking at like The Rocketeer, Dave Stevens, and which his art just blew my socks off, and I got really into the old EC comics, horror, science fiction, war, crime.
Nice.
I loved all that, and I did not like the superhero stuff. So I stayed away from Marvel and I stayed away from DC like the plague.
Yeah.
Just thought it was just like men running around in tights and stuff, and
Yeah.
that like goofy, like high school kind of like soap opera type stuff. And I was just like, wasn't interesting to me. I mean, I wanted, well, the great thing about comics is you can go anywhere, it's like the imaginations, like before we had CGI and it got really good, like comics was where you could visualize other planets and the future and the deep past and just all kind of, and I loved the landscape of the imagination that comics created, and I didn't love superhero stuff, so I turned it down. And then somebody had to explain to me that Frank Castle's not a superhero. He's just a dude and he's really angry and he kills people. And I was like, oh, all right, that sounds interesting. And then I saw Tim Bradstreet's art, and the realism of that. I thought, wow, if we could do that, like that would be really cool. And that's kind of how they sort of roped me in, In other words, they just said yes to everything that I that I said. And I like to think that I brought a little more realism into the project than wasn't there initially. And I was always trying to push to make Taxi Driver, I wanted to make that gritty sort of New York realism. And then they hired John Travolta. So John didn't want to leave his home state of Florida. So we had to change. This is after I'd already signed on the dotted line, and they're like, oh, it's going to take place in Florida now. I was like, Jesus Christ, what have I got myself?
So wait a minute.
I'm getting my teeth.
It's all good. It's all good. So the Florida location was not about tax credits and shooting locations. It was about Travolta wanting to stay close.
Travolta not wanting to shoot too far. He's a pilot, so he's
okay.
like, listen, we can shoot somewhere, where I can kind of fly my plane to work every day, but I want to fly for too long. So
fair enough, right?
Yeah. So we shot in Tampa because John Travolta was the bad guy. I mean, these are the decisions that, in the consideration of the soup, when you're making a movie and you bring it to life, all these people get involved, and the project changes. You can't help it. No matter what you do, the thing that's in your head evolves into this thing when it comes into reality. And how that happens spells the difference between whether you get a good movie or a bad movie, how those forces gel together. And that's why, filmmaking is not a democracy. There's a director, and the director has the final say, although it's always a wonderful creative collaboration. Like the guy at the helm is responsible for every frame and what it looks like and what happens and how it unfolds and every decision. So when you say, yeah, okay, we got John Travolta to play the bad guy. Oh, but he wants to shoot in Florida. then you have a decision to make as a director. You're like, all right,
Yeah.
does this movie, set in Florida? My answer, no, of course not.
I'm assuming you went to the source material like Punisher comics or whatnot and started to educate yourself about, the character you're going to play beyond the script. Am I right to assume that you went for Ennis?
I went for everything. I read, of course, I read all the Ennis stuff because they were basing the movie on his graphic novel that he did. And there were good parts of that. There were goofy shit in that, but that was the one that they decided to lay it out. But I read it all. Everything I could get my hands on at the comic shop.
When the Punisher was fighting demons at a certain point, you read that shit too? I
stayed away from the demons. I got all the back stuff. I knew that I was going to be more of a fan of the stuff from the earlier, Punisher than the later Punisher. But I relied on whatever, they weren't publishing it all on the internet. I had to go to the comic shops and whatever they had in the box. So I bought whatever they had in the box. I went to different shops. There's secret headquarters in Silver Lake, which just moved to Glendale, unfortunately, but not too far away from me. And then there's Golden Apple, and there's a couple other spots in LA, but I would just, pick up whatever I could.
Obviously, you have to sort of adjust to the movie that's being made. And obviously that's the part of an actor. What I did know is I was watching an interview with you in Knoxville, actually, I think a year ago. I wasn't aware that you actually were the sort of the head of Dirty Laundry. And the reason I want to bring this up is because I felt like that shift in tone was actually like the precedent of what is almost like comic book movies now. Outside of Marvel, like these dark R-rated. Look at the Snyder Cut.
When we brought that's what I was going for in the first one. I was always pushing the director and the studio to make it more gritty, more darker, more realistic, but people they couldn't wrap their mind around that because Christopher Nolan's Batman hadn't come out.
Exactly.
It came out shortly after The Punisher. And once that came out and did so well and people understood, you can get dark with these. You can be gritty. It's like nobody understood that in 2002, 2003, when the movie, I think it came out 2004. But when we were making it, I was speaking Greek. They just didn't get it. They didn't understand, and they didn't understand the comic book fan base either. They didn't understand the appetite for that kind of thing. Until Christopher Nolan brought out the fucking Dark Knight. And then they were like, oh, okay, we get it now.
You obviously spearheaded Dirty Laundry. Make this little short about a Marvel character. I feel like nowadays you sing half of a tune, you're getting sued. But you were able to essentially make what I consider the quintessential Punisher.
Yeah.
Without Marvel. How the hell did you pull that off?
I had an idea. I met Phil Joannou on a project he was getting together. That project, it didn't end up happening, but I had lunch with Phil Joannou, who I love State of Grace. And I, was gushing about State of Grace and wanting to do some realistic, gritty crime thing. And Phil was, he's like, yeah, but nobody, gives the money to make that kind of stuff anymore. And then he said, I said, how would you go about that? And he goes, well, you need something to dine out on. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And he's like, you got to create something that people want to take you out to dinner. It's like, you got to have something that's pops, that catches people's attention. And then, you can sort of, that gets your foot in the door. And then you can kind of, make a push for something that might be a little bit different. So I went home and I thought about that. And I thought, fuck, man, I should just make a little short film. And do the Punisher the way I saw the Punisher, because nobody, that didn't exist. And I was like, this is what I get, when I was doing the preparation for the role, I would go on this it might still be around, Superhero Hype.
I heard about it back in the day. Yeah. Back, like I used to visit that like back when
right.
Joe Blow was still like new,
So that was a thing, Superhero Hype, and they would, and they had threads for every character you could think of. And I went on the Frank Castle thread, and just started reading everything I could. And it was pretty obvious to me that the things that the fans on that site liked about Frank Castle were the things I liked. They liked the grittiness. They liked the take no prisoners attitude. They had a feeling of they wanted to fucking take a gun and just fucking shoot the world. And Frank gave them that outlet, you know, and they were very sophisticated in their sort of emotional understanding of the character. And so I knew that I wasn't crazy. And I thought, you know, if I do this the way I sort of see it, then I'd feel like I did my part, you know, because I didn't really feel like I got my Frank Castle out of that movie. So I thought, you know, and then I can put this to bed, you know, here it is. This is my Frank Castle. And,
I mean, it blew up the internet. I don't know if you remember that. I do, because that thing was new. That wasn't, I mean, it's more like now it's kind of commonplace a little more, but that was,
right.
pardon my French, pretty fucking crazy.
It came out, it popped. Yeah.
And, you know, I had also recently met Chad St. John, who wrote a script. They might actually be making this now, but this was, of course, you know, this was a long time ago. It was like 2011, 2012. And he'd written this script, an action script with no dialogue. The entire script had not one word of dialogue. It was all action. It was all, and it worked. The guy pulled it off, you know? It's like you didn't need dialogue. And it was a silent film, but it was an action film, and brilliant. And he had the Hughes brothers attached to direct it at one point. So I forget why we met, but we met. And then and I just met Phil, and I had just met Addie Shankar. So I brought the three of them together. I pitched them all the idea individually, call them up and go, hey, look, I got this idea. And I had outlined the story. I knew the story, you know, because I was a big fan of that. There's an old television commercial. Was it Mean Joe Green or something? It was a Coca-Cola commercial where this kid gives the football player Coke, right? And he drinks it. They're like, you know, in the off the stadium, right? They're in that little hallway off the stadium, and it's backlit. And he's drinking and he hands it back to the kid. He goes, "Thanks, kid."
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, it's like that. Yeah.
And he walks out. I was like, that stuck with me. I was like, I could do something like that. And that kind of gave me the kernel of the idea. So I pitched that to Chad. And one weekend, he just wrote it up and gave it to Phil. And Phil's like, this is brilliant. You know, Phil, I remember he told me that the night before shooting, he said his wife was laughing at him because he was in the living room acting out all the parts of the action sequence when Frank beats up all those dudes at the end with the body. Yeah, he acted that whole thing out, worked it all out, storyboarded it, and had a blast. You know, we all had a blast. We all shot it downtown LA. I think it was a 2-day shoot. And I think it was two, it might have been one, but I think it was a 2-day shoot. And then I remember the Golden Globes was the night of our last day. So I had a driver waiting for me with my tuxedo in the back of the thing, and I'm downtown LA in my underwear, pulling on my fucking tuxedo to jump in there. And I was late. I missed the press line and all that, but I showed up and they took a couple of pictures, and then I went in there to lose the Golden Globe, and then I went home. That was the last night.
Out of curiosity, when's the last time you saw The Punisher 2004? Or are you the type of actor you don't really look at your shit once you do it?
No. I'm sitting around on Saturday night. I'm not going to put on some movie and stare at myself. No, absolutely no.
Well, when's the last time you saw yourself in that film? And I have a purpose for that question.
We did a screening. We did a preview screening, and I think it was Ain't It Cool? Yeah. It was either Joe Blow or Ain't It Cool? But they brought in a couple of writers, you know, a couple of guys who were going to write up about it as a sneak preview, right? The movie wasn't finished all the way. And I brought my girlfriend, that I think she might have been my wife by then. And the movie didn't have music, right? Until the third act. Like when he finally, you know, puts on his gear and he goes and kills everybody, that's when the music kicked in. That's when
Declaration of intent, yeah.
Right. That's when the music kicked in.
Yeah.
And people loved it. And the writer, whoever showed up to write about it said, this is bleak and dark and fucking nasty. And he was blown away. Well, the director then got on a plane and went off to Italy or wherever he went to finish the score with a live orchestra and stuff. And then they put music into the first 2/3 of the movie. It changed the tone. It completely changed the tone. And the appreciation for what it was went down.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing what that can do, because the bleakness of like having no music, and you're not aware, you're not watching the movie and going, there's no music. You're just watching the movie. But then when the music kicks in the third act, it's like this whole new dimension opens up into the film, and the emotional payoff was so much stronger. Right. But for whatever reason, they didn't realize that, and they thought, well, we made the score, we're going to put it in. and it brought everything to an even level. In other words, like when you know music, you're watching the movie and then it explodes. Whereas if you got the music throughout, then the explosion isn't as intense. And then the writer had to retract his statement, He sort of said, well, I guess I saw an earlier cut, and because he didn't like the movie as nearly as much as he did the first time he saw it with no music.
I just, from an outside point of view, looking at you as an actor, I don't think I've ever seen you as invested as you invested in the Frank Castle character, not only 2004, but also Dirty Laundry.
I appreciate that. I do. That one connected with me. That story, I really, you try to, as an actor, put yourself into a position of that people really go through in real life, So for me, the story is never sort of a story. It's always like, if it's a good story and it's a story I want to tell, it's like people have gone through this. Like there are human beings on the planet that this is more or less their story. They may not have strapped on some guns and then gone and killed everybody, but this happens, in the world. This is our world. And so I feel a commitment to the human beings, and like, I guess the most extreme example of that would be Mickey Mantle. I got to play Mickey Mantle and I thought, this is for his parent. This is for his son. This is for his wife. That's who I was performing for. It's like, I got to get this right for the people that knew Mickey, because they're going to lay this down on film and nobody's ever going to meet the guy. He's dead. So you feel a real obligation.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. We love your work. We love what you do. We love how you speak to us through your art. So thanks, bro. I really appreciate it, man.
Much appreciated. It's fun, fellas.
Appreciate your time, my friend. It means more than we can say, honestly.
Well, keep fighting the good fight.